Michael Korda, who was Alex Kellner?
Alex Kellner was the name that my uncle Alexander Korda was born with, and which he changed when he moved to Budapest as a university student because it sounded, in a world that was deeply anti-Semitic, too Jewish. At first, he spelled the new name Korda, C-O-R-D-A, as in Sorsum Korda, lift up your hearts. Then he changed it to K-O-R-D-A because it looks more Hungarian that way.
Who was Sir Alex Korda? What did he do?
He was perhaps the prototypical film producer, film czar, but also film director. He directed his first film at a teenage age in 1914, and directed at least 100 and perhaps twice that many movies during the course of his life, and produced I don't know how many, many, in Europe, in the United Kingdom, where he eventually settled, and of course in Hollywood in periods when he was there. He was an affable genius, and being his nephew was a full-time excitement.
What was his influence on you? He, your father, and your other uncle?
Well, first of all, an enormous respect for talent of any kind. By definition, people who are good at making films are good at recognizing all sorts of talents, even though they don't share it themselves. And secondly, although they were intense on making the best possible film and intense on making profitable films, they also had a great capacity for enjoying what they were doing, for having fun, and for the friendships that came along with their business relationships. They were enormously influential in my life.
So what was your childhood like?
Well, barring that great unforeseeable episode of the Second World War, which set my father and myself and my mother to first Canada and then the United States in the late autumn of 1940, because Alex found himself unable to complete 3 films in England in the war. One was Jungle Book, the other was The Thief of Baghdad, and the third was That Hamilton Woman with Larry Levier and Vivian Leigh. And the only way to get them done was to go to Hollywood and do them. So we all went off to California, and that was a huge upset in my life. Before that, I had been brought up in England. I thought of myself as English. I expected to live the rest of my life. If those thoughts occurred at 6 or 7 years old, children, I don't think they do. And I suddenly found myself plunged into a new world, which was America, and not brought back to England again till 1945 or 1946 after the war was over. So my childhood was in no way difficult, but was a constant succession of ups and downs and changes and moves that were very unsettling, which is probably why I stick close to home now.
In your book, Charmed Lives, a Family Romance, you write that, like my father, Alex went to immense trouble to see that the Korda children were spared the grim deprivations of his own youth, while at the same time believing that an unhappy childhood was essential to success. Paradoxically, because we had not suffered, he was unable to take us seriously.
I think that's true. Alex had gone through so much, being born in Hungary at an age of fierce anti-Semitism, being poor, but unimaginably poor by any standards that we can draw today, when the father of the 3 children died at a quite young age for them, and then becoming, in his teens, the mainstay of his family, having not only to go to Budapest as a student, but to make enough money to support his 2 brothers and his mother. And Alex was, in any case, by instinct, a survivor, no matter what happened. First World War, Second World War, Alex kept on going and kept surviving. He loved us very much, but he didn't take seriously people who had not had that experience of having to scrabble and fight for survival.
Why did you not go into the movie business?
Well, I thought there were enough Kordas in the movie business to begin with. And the second thing is, I could not see myself as having a real talent for the movie business. It struck me that the only thing I knew how to do was play with words. And so I became associated with words, and eventually I became a book publisher, and then I became a book writer. I think that was actually quite satisfactory. I don't think the world needs another Korda in the movie business.
You fell into publishing accidentally.
Quite accidentally. I'd never thought of it as a serious profession. In fact, I didn't think of it as a profession at all. I was a book consumer. It never occurred to me how books are produced or why they're produced or any of those things. And I came over here after completing my education at Oxford to work for my cousin Sidney Kingsley on a book about the Hungarian Revolution in which I participated, rather a play about it. When that failed, I went to CBS as a scriptwriter, which is really hard to imagine how grubby that is as a world. It was like the shape-up for a longshoreman. You went every morning to CBS, sat in this big room, and waited till they either presented you with a book or a script or not. And once they did, then he took it home and you read it and brought it back the next day with a report and got paid. So for me, when a job opened up in book publishing, it was like this huge change in my life because you got a weekly paycheck. You had a desk. You had a place to work. And I think that because that was such a huge change in my life, my relationship to the place I worked, Simon & Schuster, became an absurdly fixed one. I spent 48 years working at Simon & Schuster. And that's because it was, in some sense, home.
When did you become editor-in-chief?
I can't remember. Certainly it was for a long part of that 48 years. I think I became editor-in-chief maybe 4 or 5 years after I went to Simon & Schuster in 1958.
When did you leave Simon & Schuster? What year?
I don't remember exactly what year. It would have been perhaps 10 years ago, something like that. I was halfway tempted to try for 50 because it's a round number and seems a sort of serious episode in life. But my beloved wife, Margaret, felt, and I felt too, that eking out the last 2 years merely for the satisfaction of being able to say 50 as opposed to 48 really didn't make much sense. So I left really with no regrets and have never been back. I have the greatest fondness for Simon & Schuster and for all those who work there, and good relationships with them too. But there came a moment when I no longer wanted to do it.
What does an editor-in-chief do?
Well, it's like being a company commander, which is to say that you do what all the other soldiers do, except that supposedly you do it better and with more experience. It's not a direct order job. You don't tell other editors what to buy or what not to buy, though you may try and influence them to do all of those things. But essentially, you are first among equals.
What was it like to work with Max Schuster and Dick Simon?
It was fascinating because, first of all, because Max Schuster was a deep eccentric. And secondly, because they went back to the very beginning of book publishing when they and Bennett Cerf were all young people together going into the book business in an age when the book business did not, to be frank, have a lot of Jews. They were among the first to confront that. Horace Liverwright and Alfred A. Knopf came slightly before them. And I believe that Dick Simon, as Bernard Cerf did, actually worked for Horace Liverwright, who was the alcoholic uber genius of book publishing in his age. And so they connected themselves to a whole world of book publishing that was utterly fascinating. And they were, as I say, in different ways, hugely eccentric and interesting people.
How often is an editor also a writer, which you became?
Well, most editors past a certain age take a stab at writing a book. It's rather like eating out in restaurants and deciding that you ought to be able to cook. I don't think very many editors have become full-time writers or written as many books as I have, which I think now amount to 22 or 23. That, I think, is probably unique. Most people retire from their book publishing careers before they take up a writing career. I did not. I put a toe in the water writing books, and to everybody's surprise, above all to my own.